Hey, Captain. I need your help, and we ought to keep it hush-hush. You know about what happened here, right? The history of Amber Heights?
You're talking about the massacre. Back when the corps were pulling out, pirates raided the place and killed the MSI bigwigs living here.
Right. Common belief is that the pirates fled to an old relay station that had already been abandoned, but nobody could find them. The station's locked up, but one of my people found an old data cartridge in a nearby rat nest. It's mostly corrupted, but I pulled a couple codes off of it. One is the code to the Amber Heights gate. I don't recognize the other, but it's similar. I bet it opens a door. Graham isn't fond of talking about the history here. He had friends who worked here. The massacre hit him pretty hard. You know him. Live and let live and all that. I don't want to burden him right now, especially if this ends up being a dead end. Just a warning. The area's infested with mantisaurs. I'd send some help, but we're, preparing for war. Appreciate it. Here's the code. If it works, bring back anything you find. Supplies are best, but information's good too. If someone was behind the Amber Heights massacre, it'd give a lot of people around here some closure to find out who and string them up. Good luck. Watch out for the Taros.
new. The way the edges are burnt, I guess people did this, not the wilds.
That's gonna leave a mark. They're on us. Nice one. That's the last of them.
Could I get another advance, Mr. Nandi?
Just make sure it's properly logged. Well, new business turns up at last. Celia, didn't I tell you our new statistics-based advertising model would be a hit?
That you did, sir.
How can yield improvements of 26.7% not quicken the pulse? How can 32% cost savings not moisten the loins?
You've often posed these very questions.
Clear my schedule. This newcomer has a meeting with me. Celia, will you make a note of that for my self-review? Very generous.
Noted.
But not so generous I can't drive a good bargain. Now, who sent you? Rizzo's, perhaps? Or Auntie Cleo herself? Oh. I suppose that means you aren't here for the salt tuna. Oh, a shame. I'd been saving a bottle of iceberg-aged whiskey for an occasion like this. I had hoped that livening up our advertisements with enticing figures would draw the other corporations back to our bosom, but it seems we're back to the drawing board. Surviving alone isn't as easy as it looks. Thanks to the so-called hazard clause, Monarch has been cut off from the board's resources and protection for 10 years now.
So-called is right. We've got our hazards, but we're still here, damn it. The board took off without so much as a thought for the folks left behind.
And now you don't have to play by their rules. Sounds like a deal to me.
Now, we've kept ourselves in business by trading with individual corporations, but given the off-the-books nature of those transactions, such arrangements are precarious. Yes, freedom is a tempting ideal, but a rather costly paramour.
Well, Mr. Nandi here has a rather ingenious plan to get MSI restored to the board.
On our terms, mind you.
Ingenious plan? Don't get me wrong, I'm starting to admire your sand, but I bet you could overcomplicate a sisty sandwich.
What a charmingly roguish turn of phrase. Allow me to express my thanks at your confidence and assure you that my plan is indeed sufficiently complicated.
And if our advertising scheme hasn't borne fruit, then perhaps it's time we took matters into our own hands.
It's true, our Celia is an alarmingly competent middle manager. At any other company, she'd be wasted in data entry. The plan she refers to is a two-pronged approach, and the first part involves seeing Stellar Bay properly defended.
And a Mantisaur problem, and a Marauder problem.
Many, many problems, but they can all be solved with a Bolt 52 cartridge. If you can get us what we need to rejoin the board, starting with the Bolt 52, we won't need to advertise anymore. We can stop our transmissions altogether.
And you'll have a powerful ally on the board.
Oh, yes. I'm going to be up all night with this. All those blanks waiting to be filled, boxes waiting to be ticked.
Try to control yourself, sir.
Have you any idea how powerful this is? Corporations have been toppled with less. But that's exactly what this is. The world isn't changed with guns and speeches, much as Graham and his followers would like to think, but rather with meticulous documentation. And the Bill of Liquidation/Transfer Form 52 is one of the most formidable pieces of data entry in all of Halcyon. One false stroke can invalidate the entire document.
It's true. One of the old execs gave herself a stroke trying to fill out the exemption section.
For our part, a Bill of Liquidation/Transfer Form 52 will protect our holdings on Monarch by temporarily assigning them to a pass-through entity once we drop our bomb on the board. See, that doesn't even make sense. This is an electronic form. We don't need paperweights.
Hardly the point, sir.
Help us with this final matter, and we won't need to broadcast anymore. You have my word. I have reason to believe that one of the other corporations is operating on Monarch, illegally and in secret.
Really? Most of the time, they do illegal stuff out in the open. Cheaper that way.
If we can find proof, I can use that as leverage to encourage certain powers that be to accept our Bolt 52 and reinstate us on the board. You really think so?
Don't encourage him.
I admit I've been hatching this scheme for quite some time. I just needed someone capable to help me carry it out. If someone is operating here, then Catherine's almost certainly supplying them out of Fallbrook. Perhaps she could be convinced to tell you where they are. That's part of the problem. She has certain ambitions for Stellar Bay, and I fear my asking her would give her the leverage she's been looking for.
Don't get yourself worked up, sir. It's perfectly natural to have a healthy fear of her.
We really don't need to discuss this now, Celia. Once you, subtly work out where this corporate facility might be, bring back proof of its operation. Maybe some nice letterhead. Or someone working there. That would do it. A foolproof plan if I ever heard one. I'll leave the execution to you. You're just as rigid as the old executive committee. Why, we've hardly been able to get a clear message out until recently.
When Graham finally shut up.
It isn't easy keeping a town like Stellar Bay afloat, especially without the board's backing. We need that frequency to reach our trading partners. Indeed. That's why it's imperative that MSI be reinstated onto the board. If we can find proof that one of the companies on the board is also active on Monarch, that'll give me all the leverage I need. I knew you'd understand. Then it's good that I keep such meticulous notes. I've asked myself the same thing many times, especially seeing as the legal mechanisms we employed were part of the board's own bylaws. Not intentionally, though that's technically true. For many years, this planet was home to as many corporations as Terra 2. But back then, it was known as Terra 1. As you may have noticed, this planet has more than its share of hazards.
That ain't fair. They didn't leave on account of the hazards. They left on account of their cowardice. The hazards just gave them a reason to put to paper.
Sharp as ever, Nyoka. And as the other corporations began to tally their losses, they decided to pull out. Our leadership at the time certainly wanted to, but there were others of us who saw an opportunity. The chance to improve working hours and conditions, to reform MSI from the ground up. Ah, so you've heard about our prior acquaintance. It was a lapse in judgment on my part, and one I'm not keen to recall. Graham seemed like a reasonable man years ago. We both agreed that MSI's treatment of its workers was untenable. I thought reforms would be enough. I didn't realize you wanted to abolish the corporate system entirely. Reforms are humane, but they're also good business sense. Exhausted, sick, and malnourished workers are not productive workers. Even a cursory review of the data bears that out. Anyway, we learned of a loophole in the corporate bylaws that would allow MSI to claim ownership of the entire planet once the other corporations pulled out, creating the perfect environment for us to enact these new reforms. Technically, that may be true, but he couldn't be bothered to do the necessary paperwork to exploit it now, could he? Anyway, it didn't matter at the time. MSI's then leadership insisted we'd be relocating to Terra 2 along with everyone else. Yes, some of us stayed behind, and as the most senior executive remaining, I ended up in charge of what was left of MSI.
Must have pissed off some real big suits to get stuck with that.
On the contrary, I wrote lots of very important reports on behalf of top MSI officials before I was able to achieve this position. I moved forward with our planned reforms as well as our strategy to assume ownership of the planet. Yet not long after I renamed it Monarch, the other corporations dislodged us from the board and began an official campaign to paint us as lawless savages. I don't know. Everything we did was legal and above board. We followed their rules, and yet they still found reasons to declare us outlaws. I do think there's something useful in a governing body like the board. Something that keeps us from anarchy, but I dearly wish it functioned differently. Why wouldn't anyone? They own nearly all the resources and infrastructure in Halcyon.
Yeah, that'd go a long way toward rebuilding our homes.
If you can't beat him, might as well join him and reach into their pockets.
To be on the board is to be part of the colonial community, and being cut off means slow strangulation. I'm not a man to put pride before progress. If membership on the board can ease our hardships and provide us with opportunities, then that's the path I mean to pursue. Besides, I'm hopeful that additional leverage on our part will allow us a more equitable relationship. Indeed. I've discovered it's much easier to negotiate from a position of power. And I don't mean to leave MSI or its people at a disadvantage. My hope is to maintain the reforms we've managed here, and who knows? Perhaps once we're restored, we could spread them to other corporations.
It's straight bullshit is what it is. A fabrication rich folks use to preserve their investments by leaving a lot of people here to die slow.
Nyoka has the right of it. It's a legal provision that gives the board the authority to cordon off any planet or location that it deems dangerous. For the greater good. Allegedly. Yes, making all of MSI criminals in the board's eyes. Rather hard to run a business that way. Technically, he does. What exactly are you accusing me of? Very well. Was there something else? What can I do for you? This has been my albatross. The great shame of my career. I give MSI everything. My work, my youth, my left kidney, and for years, I was a joke to them. One of the executives required a transplant.
He's lucky they didn't want a liver or a heart.
I thought volunteering to donate might improve my prospects. Apparently not. Yeah, in charge of a scrap heap of a city. Abandoned by the board and surviving only through the hypocrisy of our trading partners. I hadn't thought of it that way. But perhaps there's something to that. Thank you for that. Was there something else?